And good afternoon, Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome to another installment of this special Take a Stand series, Tribute to Electricity Workers, in recognition of the 50th anniversary of TNTech workers joining the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. We've had several interviews so far with current OWTU executive officers like Comrades Peter Burke and Risa Ramlogan-Joda. We've had interviews with former executive officer, Comrade Harrison Thompson, and former labor relations officer, Comrade Alva Allen, talking about when TNTech workers first joined the OWTU some 50 years ago, and the various struggles that have brought benefits not only to TNTech workers, but to the working class in general in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are continuing the series this afternoon, and we are continuing with Comrade Sati Gajadhar-Inniss, the second vice president of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union and the first female to hold that position. Now, this interview will be very interesting because Comrade Sati also has the unique position of working for both TNTech at one point, and then after the privatization of power generation, the company that came out of that, PowerGen, she continued with PowerGen. So we will have the opportunity to hear about that journey and her experiences. So let me welcome Comrade Sati Gajadhar-Inniss, second vice president of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. Sati, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Comrade Ozzi, and good afternoon to our listening audience in Trinidad and also the wider Caribbean. Ozzi, it's a pleasure to be sitting here this afternoon to be able to share my experience as a female growing up in the industry. You know, in those days, we were just, we were the first set of female apprentices.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that you're off to a really great start by giving us a little bit of that background in terms of when you joined, how you came to join, and the context in which that happened. So go ahead, Comrade Sati.
Yes, I just want to say that the era that the apprenticeship I would have served would have been 80 to 85, 1980 to 1985. And as an apprentice there, you know, back then, it was pretty interesting because we had an officer, a training officer by the name of Martin Francis. I must make mention of him because it is significant because the discipline that he would have instilled with us, it would have brought us, you know, to become the adults we are today. Because going into the industry, we were the first females that as a female to be introduced into the industry. We were some 10 females that went into the industry. And it's by chance actually that I became an apprentice because I would have the apprenticeship would have started in March, I think of 1980. And I did not join with the initial set of females that would have gone in. And it is after I finished exams, my uncle, I was looking for something to do because actually I wanted to go into the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force.
Okay.
And
all right.
Yes, so I asked my uncle, you know, I'm looking for something to do until, you know, and he said, well, he understood that a female had left the TNTech trade school and I would have to do the entrance exam to go in. So I said, exam, okay, I will try it. And I went in, did the entrance exam, passed the entrance exam, and enrolled. And I started my journey in the industry back then, you know, and there was no turning back once I got involved. 1980 to 1985 was an interesting year. So growing up around that time was pretty interesting in TNTech.
Well, I could just imagine. And I know you'd have many stories because when I did the interviews with Comrade Harrison and Comrade Alva, and I'm sure you would have seen those interviews. Yeah, sure. I mean, they really were talking about, you know, an exciting time in the commission, an exciting time for the union, and an exciting time in general for Trinidad and Tobago. And you would have been a young person sort of following them during that period. So maybe you could just speak a little bit about what was that like for you?
Actually, we were not actually supposed to be involved in the trade union because Mr. Martin Francis was very strict. But, you know, being a young person and being inquisitive, you know, you felt compelled to be part of everything because it was so dynamic what was taking place. So I remember running away on a lunchtime. Well, we had lunch break. So running up, the meetings were not held on the compound or even right outside the compound at that time. We used to have to go up to the union office on Henry Street. So leaving Park and Fleming Street and going up to Henry Street, you know, so it was practically a race to get up there because you want to get up there early to get a seat and then run back down to not to lose your time for 1 o'clock to get back. So it was pretty interesting. But the thing about it is seeing these officers, you know, and hearing them, you know, and the commitment they had, to ensuring that, you know, what we were seeking at that time would have been beneficial, you know, and so it for me, that was when, you know, I think looking back now, that is when actually I would have find myself saying, yes, this is something that I want to do.
Okay, and so you took the bold decision to really be part of that movement, because what you're seeing was a movement of workers, movement of people deciding to really fight and struggle for a just cause. And so you became part of that. Can you share with us and with Trinidad and Tobago, what were some of the highlights in your participation in various struggles?
I think the highlights of that would have been, you know, we had during that time would have been going to you had negotiations taking place. So even though we were not supposed to be involved directly in the process, you know, or going to the meetings during the day, in the afternoon, you'll find yourself, because those meetings would have gone into the late hours, you'll find yourself going wherever the meetings was taking place and being part of the demonstrations outside. So whether it was in front of Hilton or in front of Holiday Inn in those days or in front of K-Pop, you found yourself going there in the afternoon and being part of, you know, the demonstration, sitting and hearing the stories of those that would have, you know, some of the stories of the things before, you know, and so that gave you the inner will to be part of it. And I think sometimes when I reflect, you know, if you don't get involved in hearing from those colleagues, you know, your colleagues of what actually took place, sometimes you don't find yourself appreciating what you enjoy. You know, so I'm able now to share with some of the younger ones, you know, some of the stories that I was even part of, because you felt you were part of it.
Yeah, and I want you to talk about some of those stories you were part of. Which can you say, I mean, you must have been part of so many, but if one or two that really stands out in your mind, like a particular location, whether it's Riverside or...
I think one of them that I remember during the, it might have been the 86, we had around 86, because the now government was 86 to 90, and you would have that cola struggle where actually the union had a big, you know, there were massive, because they wanted to remove the cola. And that struggle was important because it's something that we would have enjoyed. And the thing was, they wanted to stop it. And so the union had a massive thing about that.
All right, it just for the listening audience, COLA is cost of living allowance. So
yes,
maybe just for 1 minute, just say a little bit about what is cost of living allowance, why it was so important for you all to have engaged in such a massive struggle.
Because you see, the cost of living allowance is where it takes the inflation rate, right? It takes into consideration the inflation rate. And what happens is that So what we would have happened is that depending on the retail price index, right, and where it would be at, you would find that it would increase, whether it's 7 cents or 8 cents for every point rise, you know, that inflation would have raised at that time. So it was significant for us to be able to have that COLA as a buffer. Because at the end of each period, what you have a consolidation. So wherever COLA was at, you would have consolidated that little bit of COLA into your base pay, because that would have been your real life salary, your living wage. So it was important for us to be, you know, to have that and to maintain it, because it's a struggle that the Comrades prior to would have struggled to have as a benefit. So that would have been important for us to have. But I remember also, there was also where TNTech wanted to merge the pension plan, the Provident Fund at the time, with the pension plan. And I remember where, because they wanted the Provident Fund people to now take whatever money they had and convert it into a pension. Now, some of these comrades were almost ready to go home, and that would not have been a benefit for them at that point in time, because they saw the lump sum. And, you know, there was this old story about the last living man will get in, the standing man will have the whole, you know, whatever remains. So there was this whole thing about the Provident Fund. And I remember us marching through, you know, all of us left the power station and marching through, and all the other units came, and we actually went through the building in head office, because head office workers was not as active as the workers in the fields. So leaving, I was stationed at that time, I had already gotten permanent. And so I was even more active, you know, now, not an officer in the union, but being active.
A member, just as a member.
Yes, as a member. And we would have gone up there and actually marched to the building and, you know, encourage the workers to come out and be part of the struggle. You know, I remember after that major struggle, we had a comrade, a sister who actually became a LRO. Just after that struggle, she became a LRO with the union for a number of years, and then she moved on to other entities. So the whole thing, being part of each struggle. Yes, Comrade Ozzi, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Comrade Ozzi?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so important that you share this experience and what it meant for you, because, you know, there is this feeling that certain benefits, you know, came as a result of the goodness of the heart of management. And so many workers, even today, don't really understand that it was actions taken like by comrades like yourself, you know, marching and being actively involved in the union is what, one, got the benefits in the first place, and two, you're able to keep it, because companies and management are always trying to take back those benefits that would have been hard won.
Yes, Comrade Ozzi, is important for us. And I remember speaking, I don't know if it's you about it, but I think it's important for us to remind not just unionized workers, but workers on the whole, that, okay, like medical plans, especially those new units that are now being formed, not just in our union, but any union, that have now been formed, like pensions and medical plans. I think normally, I know, like from our standpoint at OWTU, we say once we get it in as a, you know, a benefit, we say it is compulsory that our people join it. And I think people need to understand why it has to be compulsory, because you do not appreciate these benefits until something comes up. A medical plan is important, and it should not be your choice having the money in your hand to spend. It seems to be the ideal thing, especially when your salary in some of the smaller units might be small. But as you move on and you have your illnesses or your family members become ill, you see the great need for something that you should have been contributing to. So it's important for us to remind our members and to actually educate the working population, why it's important for us to actually have these benefits and to have it where we contribute if the need be, because it's only when you need it, whether it's on retirement or whether in illness, that it is only then you recognize the importance of it.
Yeah, and I think that that is crucial that people understand that things like your pension plan, medical plans, these are part of what you'll call your means of subsistence, okay?
Yes.
And it therefore contributes to the value of your labor power. And simply having the extra cash in your hand really means that you can, that cash is then transformed into the purchasing of commodities of the capitalist class and therefore advance the capitalist interest. Whereas your interest in terms of your health and a future earnings in terms of your pension, that can be lost. So I'm happy that you brought that up, and so that people could understand what, this broader picture of what is your class interest. So it is very clear from what you're saying so far that in advancing class interest, the tea and tech workers, as far as you are, or electricity workers, as far as you were part of that, it really showed how unity, solidarity, being involved can really help improve the quality of life of people.
Ozzy, I just want to draw an example, because during the apprenticeship program, we would have been getting something like $54 per week. When we would have, during the process, maybe in our second year or second, and the thing about it is $54 per week. And those that were boarding, $18 would have come out of that for their boarding. And after 83, when there was the TNTech major settlement, right? I think it was around September of 1983. Our allowance would have increased to $136 per week. So from something like $54 per week, it went to $136 per week. So that's to tell you, you know, and we were at the, of course, it was an allowance that was being paid to us at that time. So the significant increase that the workers would have gotten would have been based on struggles that, you know, our senior, the senior workers of the company would have endured a lot.
Yeah.
I think Comrade Alva would have spoken about, you know, the struggle where a comrade would have committed suicide, and another comrade would have, I think, somebody got bounced during those struggles in front of Riverside Plaza. And those are things, you know, that a lot of workers, you know, they come in at this time, but, you know, and they know, and they get their salaries, but, you know, to really reflect and think about those that would have passed and what they would have endured for us to enjoy what we enjoy now. You know, I think sometimes, you know, we need to remind, you know, our young ones as to the struggles that, you know, our you know, senior officers and workers would have endured, you know, what they would have endured.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you know, we are highlighting that, because this series is about a tribute to electricity workers and a greater appreciation of the contribution that electricity workers have been making in terms of the improving the quality of lives of not just tea and tech workers, you know, because it sets a sort of benchmark for other workers across Trinidad and Tobago. Now, I want to bring up this issue of the privatization of power generation. Can you, because you would have made that transition between tea and tech and power gen. So let us talk a little bit about that period of the—
Well, that even before, because we would have been privatized in, was it 94? 94.
Yeah, 94.
Yeah, December of 94. And, but the thing about it is that during that period, even prior to, you had the struggle of no to privatization taking place. And I remember all the articles because, you know, when you look now of what is happening in a lot of the industries, you find that, and I sit in meetings, you say, but it's the same thing that happened during the era of the prior privatization. Because I remembered even the engineers in those days were complaining about the lack of maintenance to the generation aspect of, you know, of the utility, yeah? Because they weren't maintaining the plants, the plant and equipment. And you found that as we moved into that era, you found, you know, there was so much hype about the note of privatization taking place. And I remember a particular day we had a situation where I think that is the day Stanley Otley came and stood up outside, because all the time they were saying, no, we're not privatizing, you know, we're not privatizing. You was reading so much about it and they were saying no, they were telling the workers no. And I remember this particular day, Stanley Otley came and stood up outside and spoke to the workers, and we had actually
Can you just say who was Stanley Otley for the audience?
Stanley Otley in those days would have been he would have been the general manager.
Okay. All right.
And he came and he stood up and he was talking about it, you know, and I remember us after we had in those days we used to have gather-ups by the gate. So before you go in, 7 o'clock, you know, from maybe 6:30, the officers would have been outside the gate. So, you know, as you're going in, you will stand up and you will hear exactly what was taking place.
Yes.
And this particular day, the meeting went beyond 7 o'clock. So when we went back in and things like that, the Thursday for pay now, when we were supposed to get pay, when the weekly workers were supposed to get pay, they cut the time. So that was Thursday. Normally you get pay on a Thursday. So the Friday morning, the branch officers and the workers at the power station marched up to the plant manager's office in the power station because workers' pay was cut. And I remember everybody, you know, sitting, that was a whole thing where all the workers, because you had distribution workers and the power station workers in this little 2x4 office, the plant manager's office. Actually, that was something that, you know, a whole, that became, you know, a whole revolutionary kind of thing where after that, there was a lot of disciplinary action taking place. But those were so committed officers and knew so much about industrial relations. You had those comrades after, a lot of them was dismissed because of the activities. But our officer even came back and ended up being industrial relations officer of Tea and Tech. So you know, to tell you, you know, that I guess his experience was so much, you know, that they needed him back, you know, in the industry itself, in industrial relations. But those were the days, and like, I think I was mentioning it to someone, even though you had so much conflict between the union and industrial relations, you know, industrial relations was so tight in those days, because in the early 80s, you had Comrade Alvan Day being dismissed, you know, removed from the compound, in some cases being locked up and stuff like that. But yet, inside of that, there was a relationship, because you had when supervisors, you would have supervisors training, and part of the supervisor training would have been industrial relations, where the union would have been involved. You would have where orientation, where the union would have been involved. I remember when I first got employed, when I signed my contract of employment at head office, the HR person at the time that I would have signed up with gave me the medical card to fill out, gave me the collective agreement, and the safety book. We used to call, in those days, we used to call the collective agreement the yellow book. So you were given a copy in your hand. So it's not to say that you got employed and you didn't even know if there is a union. That happens now in a lot of places. You know, people join a company and they don't even know if there's a union in the place. So that's to tell you, you know, even industrial relations there was a respect for the union. We might not have seen eye to eye, but there was a respect. We would have reached the court a lot of times, but there was a respect that was there, that the union existed.
You know what you know, I would broaden it even further. It was a recognition back then that there is an important role
Correct.
for trade unions, and that there was a recognition that workers being organized is an important aspect of they exercising their fundamental rights as a human being and as a worker.
Yeah.
Now, what you have is a complete disregard of the concept, or disregard of the idea that workers are to be organized and therefore be better able to bargain for their interest. And as a net result of that is a disregard for the collective bargaining process, disregard for the collective agreement, disregard for trade unions, and so on. So it was very interesting that you were able to share your experience to see that difference as it sort of evolved over time, where there was a shift, a general shift of attitude. And I would even go so far as to say a shift of values, where before there was a value placed on organized workers, a value placed on people's organizations, a value placed on trade unions, a value placed on the idea that workers must be represented, their interests must be represented. A different set of values today, where it disregards that completely, because it sees in this new sort of value system, workers are nothing more than a sort of cog in the machinery, and they have no rights, they have no say, they have no power. And I think that that is exemplified in terms of the example that you just gave.
Yes, and I think Comrade Harris would have touched on it. Seeing a movement from industrial relations to HR.
That's correct.
I have I have no problem with people, changing names and stuff, but I've seen a shift also in the recognition of and the relationship between trade unions and the organizations, that where there are trade unions, you have seen a total, and there's a whole degeneration of industrial relations based on that aspect. Because what I remember, a practitioner would have indicated that they always find where there are organized workers, there's a better flow within the organization, because of course you have limits that you could work under based on the collective bargaining process. And so a practitioner would have told me that. But now, when you have these officers now coming in, they're trying to dismantle the system that they would have met. So, instead of building on it, they're trying to dismantle, because I don't know if it's a sense of trying to have a level of power that they figure over the years that the union would have. But if you have a proper collective agreement in place and the respect for what people would have sat and negotiated and agreed to, then an organization could be run so much easier and so much, without much conflict.
In fact, there'll be increased productivity, which they like to talk about so much.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But I just want to also, go ahead, sorry.
No, you continue your chain of.
Yes, I just wanted to, to also, I remember a colleague telling me that, that, you see, keeping the link as we move ahead, we within the trade union movement must stay in contact with our elders. Is not to rehash the history, but to continue to appreciate where they have been, for us to connect with that, for us to now share to our young ones coming in. There must be a connection, and because the journey did not start with us and it does not end with us.
Yeah.
It continues, and we must not give up on what we believe is right. I have a mantra that I keep for myself where I always want what even better than what I would have enjoyed.
Yeah. And I think that that is critical and is part of the, what I would call the deconstructing of consciousness. By disconnecting people from their ancestral past or from their foreparents, or what they're in fact doing is disconnecting them from struggle. And if you disconnect a people from the rich history of struggle, what you in fact do is you disempower them.
Yes, yes.
And this is where they want to take us, to have a disempowered workforce.
Yeah, and you know, if we don't continue in the tradition that, you know, in that great tradition, what we will find happening is that workers coming in and giving up what people would have struggled very hard for. And you find that sometimes workers, when the employer says something without considering what they enjoy and, you know, what they could lose by agreeing to just step into new agreements, you know, some workers, just because they might see a comfort zone for themselves, but not understanding that there's a greater picture than maybe one group of workers. You know, so okay, like let's just say that a company wants something. The union does not only have to think about that particular entity, but think about the wider trade union, and especially in our place, the wider trade union movement, because, you know, because a lot of other unions look up to us and look up to what we do. So we need to set, you know, set the bar, and what we have, we cannot just sit and agree to lose it.
Yeah, agree. So let us now talk about that transition from TNTech to PowerGen and that experience for you.
Yes, so what would have happened is that when we would have changed, and what would have happened during that period of time.
Sati, just before you do that, there's something you said, and I wrote it down, and I said, no, we have to go back to it because it's something that you actually mentioned to me several times. You sort of mentioned it in passing a little bit earlier, and I just want you, just before you move to the actual transition, just talk a little bit more about the pre-transition period when you were mentioning the fact that you had operator or the engineers who were complaining about lack of maintenance.
Okay, yes, let me go back to that.
Yeah.
So what would have happened is that we had a period of time where the plants were deteriorating, and, you know, and so you find around that time, no maintenance wasn't being done. And eventually we heard that the company was going to be sold, the generation aspects were going to be sold. That would have been, you know, so the struggle, that would have been in 1994, December of 94. And that transition would have been one of where you had all at that point in time, we had, and I remember Comrade Allen would have mentioned it, you had these two units in the Port of Spain power station, Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, because there were two turbines that came in and never operated at their full capacity.
Yeah.
So the older machines, number 1 and 2, 3 and 4, Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull was just as you call as it was called. You know, they used to behave differently to the other machines. And the machine, I think, was number 4 was opened up at that time. And you had where I remember we had several demonstrations taking place at that time, because we did not, you know, the thing was that we were still against the privatization, that whole process, because of, you know, we know that, of course, with privatization will bring reduction in staffing and, you know, a whole deterioration of what we would have enjoyed. And we actually, I will never forget that particular day, Comrade Ozzi, when, you know, when we had the machines, the machine was opened up and we said, the comrades from the other areas said, we come into Port of Spain to have a demonstration around the power station. So I said, okay. But just before that, during that process, that whole thing, you know, we would have, when the place was privatized, it was so different, Comrade Ozzi. Actually, I kind of went forward, but you know, with age, you know, that happens at times. Don't worry. Yeah, but during that privatization process, so many things would have taken place, you know, because the comrades would have, there was meetings upon meetings. We had several reports, and I think one of the senior comrades would have touched on it, where there was reports saying that we did not need to privatize, you know, the generation aspect, that we just needed proper maintenance in the plant and equipment, and those things. And you know, it was not heeded. It was not heeded, and eventually we were notified that it would be done. And it was in 1994, December of 1994, that we were actually privatized. So PowerGen came in 1994.
Yeah.
And even that process itself, you know, we had applied for recognition and successorship dual, you know, and eventually we got recognition. The union got recognition to recognize the OWTU as a bargaining unit for PowerGen then. But we also had, during that process when PowerGen first came in, what would have happened is that they wanted to have several changes taking place. So it was a drastic move. We had actually we had some 66 workers leaving the company at that time. But what happened, it was 36 members that was actually retrenched. Because what happened, the 30 plus workers, other workers, what they chose to do, most of them would have reached early retirement, which would have been 55. So they decided to leave, take early retirement in order to make way for some of the younger ones who might have been retrenched.
Yes.
So, but it was actually 36 workers that was actually retrenched. And so with that taking place, I remember that particular day when that was supposed to happen. That morning, that is where I went forward a bit. That particular morning, the comrades would have said, they come into Port of Spain to have a demonstration. So I said, you're okay, all right. That morning when the comrades came, the lunchtime, when we came outside, there was the most set of police I would have ever seen in front of PowerGen, in front of the power station, because we said we're going to make the whole. There was police there. I remember one of the security officers at the time, the TNTEC officer, coming and saying, because TNTEC police officers were still working for the power station in those days. We heard that the letters coming today, the retrenchment letters coming today. So I was like, okay. And I remember Comrade Hailey and Black in those days, Hanif Bash would have also been the officer in charge of Point Lisas. They were all there. And so we said, okay, the police officer warned us. He told us we could not have marched. We told him it was our right to do so. And we marched around the building, but as we were going around, the company did come. The HR manager at that time did come with the letters into the power station. She came with the letters, and so when we reached back in front of the building, we were told, so the other officer said, look, Sati, we go into the other plants to see what is happening. You know, you hold it down here. And I remember trying to get onto Comrade McLeod at the time and Comrade Dudnat Mirage, calling them to find out if they, you know, what is happening. You know, I'm being told that these letters come in, you know, if they got the letters, but they were in a meeting in Petrotrin at the time. And eventually when I got on to Comrade, he said to me, he says, Sati, I'm going to the office now to check to see if this, you know, because the company faxed the letters. They faxed it. And he did tell me he got it. When we went into the building, the company actually had Army, the Defense Force, because we had the machine open up. And they had Army officers around the machine and in the plant itself, because Port of Spain was significant, you know, one of the most significant plants at that time because of the East-West corridor also. And the TNTEC system, you know, was always a weak. So we went into the plant, and I remember us going into this little lunchroom mechanical had. Oh, I don't know how all of us fit into there, but we fit into that room. And I remember, because I became the branch president because the Comrade at that time, because we were not too long, became a branch of the OWTU.
As power gen, right?
Yes, as power gen. And because the Comrade, during the initial process we were doing the operations negotiations where they wanted to change the whole structure of operations. And he got a massive heart attack, a young guy, Vincente, and he got a massive heart attack and he died. And the senior Comrade Anthony Johnson, who was actually this vice president, he says, Sati, I was the extra delegate. He said to me, he says, Sati, I'm not taking this thing at all. You need to take it. I said, Comrade, me? He said, yes, you have to take it. You have to lead. And so I was a young officer, not experienced. And being in this room back in that day, Ozzy, it was because you had big men crying.
Wow.
Crying about, you know, I am going home. What are the union doing? What we going to do? You know, if they send me home. And so we decided that, hey, nobody ain't going. Let the managers come and give out the letters in the room. So that was 1, 2 o'clock now. Managers calling people for letters. We say we're not going, and we in this little lunchroom up in mechanical. And it was backward and forward for a while. And all of a sudden, I remember calling Alva and saying, Alva, the workers here, what to do? So he said, and trying to get onto Comrade McLeod, and they eventually, Alva said to me, it was after 4 in the evening. He says, Sati, you know something, if they lock you all inside up there, that'll be a different story. So I was telling the Comrades, I said, we had to go. They say no, you know. And now me with my inexperienced self, and the branch was a pretty young branch, you know, and so I was like,
just after the formation of
after the formation of power gen. So we were pretty young in you know, this whole thing. But you know, with the strength of the workers, eventually the managers did come into the room. One of the managers, he's deceased now, Clarence Brown, he came into the room and he actually gave out the letters. He gave out the letters, those that was present the day he gave the letters to them, and they asked them to leave. And after they asked them to leave, I remember, you know, remembering what Alva told me, and I said, you know what? We have to go, right? We will leave and we'll come, you know, live to see another day. And we did, you know, we left. And after that, after that, we had several meetings, and you know, it was that whole thing there. I think that stayed with workers for a number of years. You know, that pain of seeing, you know, people, because I remember Patrick Williams, who was the branch secretary, and he came across from TNTEC. He was a branch secretary for some 20-something years. He was an officer of the union for some 20-something years. He was retrenched. And so, you know, that pain and hurt, seeing people who, you know, who would have struggled so long, And we would have went on after that to create our first collective agreement, you know, and created our first collective agreement, end up negotiating, you know, but even in the early stages, even after that retrenchment, HR in PowerGen, coming into PowerGen, did not have a big department or anything. And even so, as PowerGen came in, PowerGen started to, yes, there was this kind of standoff approach in the beginning, but understanding that they needed to forge a relationship with the union, there were some great developments that took place. And I do think that there's a respect and a appreciation by those senior managers that would have come after. There's not that deep respect for what would have taken place in that era, even as we forged a new entity after that, because you would have where we would have restructured the maintenance department. We went from maintenance would have been hourly. We went from being monthly rated, monthly paid, and that's another thing. Being monthly rated, monthly paid there's a vast difference in being monthly paid, hourly rated. And I think a lot of practitioners outside there needs to understand that, because when I am monthly rated, monthly paid, the work done, there's a value put for that per month. And it's not that every hour I work, you are going to pay me for that every hour. Yeah. So there needs to be, I think there needs to be, you know, a resetting of some people's, brain where that is concerned. You know, we need to reset the clock where that is concerned, you know, because there's, you know, people come in and they would have, you know, I don't know if it's just because of the era they're in, they're trying to change so many things, where now you have, so like, okay, we would have in the beginning, PowerGen, it was just 2 people, I think, was in HR. You had the HR director and you had the HR manager, and you had a senior person working in HR. So 3 people basically were in HR. So the company decided that if the computer courses, the HR would have said the union officers need to be trained also. So we would have gone 5-day training courses. I remember doing ADR, HR, the HR manager, director at the time would have organized for me to go and do ADR. You know, she would have arranged for me, and I don't think she would have expected me to be on her side or anything.
Yeah, ADR meaning alternative dispute resolution, yes?
Yes, yes. You know, so I don't think she expected me to be on her side or anything, is having where we could have dialogue. And I often say to people, you know, it's quite interesting when you go to these forums and they ask you, where you from? And you say, oh, OWTU Workers Trade Union. You know, because, you know, they expect you to be from some company or something, you know, and when you go and you say, oh, okay, all right, you know. So because I remember you had people like Mr. Yates, and you had attorneys, because we went to Tobago for a few days when I did the ADR, and you know, sitting with those people, and it was mostly HR practitioners, well, IR HR practitioners in those days. And yes, I didn't change my position. I didn't change the way I think. But you know, being in the space with them, you learn how they think and how they expect, you know, how they expect you to think. Yeah. So it's quite interesting, you know, that, and we would have evolved quite a lot to where we are today, where I see that a lot of the things that both company and union would have worked, because even the EAWP program, there was always EAPs.
EAWP?
Employee Assistance and Wellness Program. you always found that there were EAPs, employee assistance programs. But at that time, the union itself was looking at the wellness aspect of workers, so, and the, companies were looking at random drug testing and things in those days. So what we sought to do is that we sought to bring in the wellness aspect into the whole realm of it. So we included the W.
Okay.
In it. So I remember when we were doing, after the discussions, we would have formed a policy and we decided, hey, this committee, it is not about the company and the union fighting. It's about sitting down and thinking about the well-being of the people we represent. So everybody, we call it a steering committee because it was not, because if we had a position to send to power gen management, it would have been sent as a group. If there was a letter to do, it would have been, we discuss it and we come up with a letter that would have gone to power gen's management in those days that would have said, this is what we want for the workers. So it was not us fighting against each other. That and the medical plan was always for what is for everybody, because everybody's supposed to enjoy that. Today, I see that is deteriorating, where the company wants to make its decisions on its own as it pertains to even who is selected. Who is selected. And I think there has to be a point where enough is enough. And we cannot continue for things that our forefathers, and in my case, things that I would have helped struggle for, just being deteriorated because some young upstarts come into organizations and want to have it their way. HR is about the human resources and not about just company policies. Yeah. So we have, even if we have conflict with industrial relations and HR, I think they have to remember the basis is human resources. That is their first and foremost, should be replaced on the agenda, and not just carrying out and forming policies with all the involvement of the workers that these policies impact on. Yeah, and I think that is critical. And linked to it is something you would have mentioned earlier that I really want to just go back a little bit on. The trauma during that process of a transition, because we are becoming a society that lacks empathy. All right, if you don't want to, find solidarity is too strong a word, you find it's too associated with trade unions and left and all of that, okay. But what about that basic human character of empathy? Because here, just listening to your story, listening to you, I am just imagining what that moment would have been like. And when you think of so many thousands of workers being retrenched, you had the thousands of workers from Petrotrin, you had the workers from ArcelorMittal, and if you go across the country, workers who are in ununionized environments. So therefore, we don't even hear anything about those voices. Yeah. Those are just voices in the wilderness, right? Because they don't have the protection, or at least the possibility of being part of a union that could speak out for them. Those thousands of families that are ripped apart as a result of you being severed from your job. I think when you talk about we have to change our mindset, that is a major shift. We have to go back to a point in our own society where we feel some level of empathy. And therefore, as a collective society, whether it's in workplace A or B, whether it's workers X, Y, or Z, as a collective society, we say, no, that is not acceptable. And we will not accept a society that is ripped apart because we are lacking empathy. And therefore, if it's not happening to me, it's happening to someone else, that is their problem.
I think that is a major shift that we have to make collectively as a society.
Yes, and Comrade
Based
Ozzi,
on the story and the experience that you're sharing here with us.
yes, and remember, I said, and I remember, the union has a thing, you touch one, you touch all. And I think that has to, and you're right, that has to extend to the greater society, because if I have, and that really reached home with the petrolhead situation, where those petrolhead workers were actually demonized for the salaries that they would have worked hard for, right? And you had a situation where, I would have met people and look at how much money they're working for. Why are you complaining? But it was based on the environment they were working in. They would have got their salaries and developed their lifestyle around what they were earning. And if you have your neighbor now who had this beautiful house, you don't know, the person might still be paying for it. Is the next door neighbor. Eh? You work in Tiantek or you work in Wassa or wherever, and your next door neighbor lose his job, and he's going to lose, and you like family, because sometimes you want something, you're in and out, and you have that person losing their job and might have the potential to lose their house. Why should we wait until, because of politics, we'll wait until that person lose their house to maybe have a barbecue for them, or losing their house, or somebody gets sick and don't have a medical plan or something to throw a barbecue for them? Why can't we, as our brothers and sisters, keepers, stand up with one voice and speak out when something is wrong? You see, and these are the things that, and when I speak about, and that is why it's important for us to speak to other people, learn from them, from their experiences. So then we will be able to appreciate what they have been through, for us to build on that. Because with all the experiences, I remember, I must mention, Sister Thelma, Williams, who, some of these things that she would have shared would have given me this appreciation for not what I enjoyed, but what they would have endured coming up. So, and we have to, and some people will say, is the trade union movement need to do it? But it's not just the trade union movement. As a society, when something is wrong, we have to forget the politics, we have to forget our affiliations, whether it's religious, our religions, because there are some things that I remember as a young person growing up, people, were you as a little Indian girl, because, you hang among these big, strong fellas, but I saw the need for that. And that is where, we have to remove ourselves from race, whether it's our religious beliefs, and look at the greater picture and take care of our fellow men in general. And until we could do that, we'll continue losing instead of gaining ground.
Yeah, yeah. Sati, as we sort of winding down on this interview, which is, I must say, the conversation is really fascinating. And so many thoughts going through my mind at the moment. And because what you're in fact doing by sharing this experience of Tiantek transitioning over to PowerGen, but as a person growing up in the union and being around persons who were really instrumental in some of the critical changes we have seen that have improved the quality of life of so many people. I mean, you've been able to broaden this discussion to sort of this wider picture of the collective society. And I think this is one of a tremendous contribution that unionized workers, and in this case, we are in tribute to the electricity workers, have really brought as part of enriching our own culture and enriching our sense of identity as a society. What would you sort of would like to say to up and coming, not just union officers or even union members, but workers in general?
Ozzy, before I do that, I just want to say that 1980
Yes.
to 1994, I would not, even though I wanted to become an officer of, of the Defense Force, where I would have, yes, do a national service. I would not have done it any other way, looking back now. Because it is because of that experience, I am where I am today, not just with a job in power gen, or not, being just an executive officer. I'm talking about a human being where would have my experience and my knowledge from then would have taken me to becoming the second vice president where I am today. And it's not without the grooming that I would have gotten, the discussions I would have had with all the senior officers and the workers, what they would have shared that would have brought me to this point. And I just want, it's important for, as a female, that we need to look beyond just the things we do at home. There's much more outside there than just the things we do at home or just doing a job and going back home. There's so much that we could do for our peers and for the greater Trinidad and Tobago and, the greater society as a whole. I would be feeling as a executive officer, not to mention that there's a lot of work to be done, Comrade Ozzi, as it pertains to the gender issue in Trinidad and Tobago. My heart goes out to all those females that would have lost their lives because of domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider society, because we have it, because of COVID and linking up with my colleagues in Latin America in particular, it is something that is prevalent throughout Latin America and the Caribbean right now, especially with COVID, where people feel boxed in and the thing. And I would just like, to take this opportunity to say there's a lot of work that we need to do in where the gender policy is, national gender policy is concerned, and also C-190 rectification. A lot of people will look at that as just being violence in the workplace. It is more encompassing than that. Maybe we as a trade union need to share what the policy is all about to the wider population. But Comrade Ozzi, there's a lot of work to be done. And I think with getting other females, I will encourage other young females to get involved. Get involved, your issues.
Yes.
If you feel your issues are not just whether you're in a trade union or not, get involved, because you need to have a say in order for not just your issues, but your children and even your household issues to be discussed. Because the money that your spouse is taking home, even if you are not working, is what runs the household. So you need to be involved even if you're a housewife.
I think those, thank you so much for your words. I just want to, of course, for disclosure, tell Trinidad and Tobago I am a proud executive colleague with Comrade Sati Gajadhar-Inniss as my second vice president. And some really powerful words. And I think what I liked about the interview, it's allowing even myself to do some introspection about our society, where we are as a society. And I have some concerns around about this shift away from being at least an a society with empathy, a society that is seemingly more and more selfish, a society that is seemingly more individualistic, a society whereby somehow it is wrong for workers to have a decent job. It's like you have to feel guilty if you have a good collective agreement, or if you have a strong trade union, something that is somehow a negative as opposed to a positive. So I think that, those are some of the broad issues that are coming out here in this particular interview. And I want to really thank you for that.
And Comrade Ozzi, we have to really keep this discussion going and involve because involve the wider population, even though at times when I meet other colleagues on the outside, you know, not necessarily trade union individuals, they say, but
Yes.
you know, and you get into a discussion with them, they tell you that I never hear. I often say to them, you know, you don't find yourself, you know, to listen to a program that the OWTU have or to be in a meeting. We say it all the time. But it's just that people, for some reason, when they hear the trade union on the television or the radio, they change the station to hear music, you know. And it's only when something happens to them or a family member that actually, you know, because you have the same people who fight down the trade union movement. When one of their family members and or one of their friends get into employment difficulties, they call you up on the phone and, you know, I have this one that has a problem, could you help them? So they know that when it happens, where to turn. But I don't, you know, they feel so obligated in their jobs. But then it goes beyond that too, because you have a lot of times what happens is that, you know, and it happened because during the Petrotrin scenario, I remember, you know, individuals calling me and telling me that, you know, you all should do this and, you know, great going, you know, but at the same time, you know, they will not stand up and say something is wrong. But
Yes.
I left out one thing. My apprentice, my batch, I will call my batch 1980 to 1985. I was
Right.
speaking to a colleague this morning, and he said to me, you know, that we are, I guess, the only batch that have continuously every year in March continues to recognize our apprenticeship. So we have a group that the 85 to 19, 80 to 85, we have a group, our apprenticeship group, you know, we still very active, have, you know, we have discussions. We might be from different, you know, we find ourselves in different spaces. And that is quite interesting because you have the political side, you have the employment, some on the employer side now. But we continue to meet and this, you know, so that is a way of connecting, continuing the connection.
Yes. And I'm glad you said that because we ourselves have to connect with the wider population and not just be sort of insular and where we just talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
And this is why the series is so important to really to sort of reach out to Trinidad and Tobago, all right? And for Trinidad and Tobago to also really get a greater appreciation for the work of the union and the work and for the electricity workers themselves. I want to really thank you, Comrade Sati, and to say, to give an example of your commitment. Comrade Sati just recently came out of surgery, and she took the time, notwithstanding the fact that she's on sick leave, to take this little time here just to be with us. In fact, just before this interview, she would have had clinic. So I really want to thank you and to say to you on behalf of Trinidad and Tobago, thank you for the continued work that you do. Your belief in people, your belief in workers, your belief in the institution called the trade union help give a lot of young people the inspiration and the motivation to make their contribution. And I really want to extend my gratitude to you, Comrade Sati Gajadhar-Inniss.
Thank you, Comrade Ozzi, and thanks to all those that would have come before me. Without them, I would not be sitting here this afternoon.
Okay, so we really come to the close of this installment of the special Take a Stand series, a tribute to electricity workers. We were speaking to Comrade Sati Gajadhar-Inniss, second vice president of the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, sharing her experiences. And I think I would consider this a very motivational interview. And I really hope that all of the listening audience take in the interview as therefore have a greater appreciation for the kind of sacrifice that trade unionists make on a day-to-day basis, just so that we can have a better quality of life, all of us, and therefore a better Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much. This has been another installment of the Take a Stand special series.